is my Throne of Glass reading order. I will be specifically talking about the order in which I read this series. However, I will give some explanation for the different ways you can read it so you can make your own decision. Starting out, I read The Assassin's Blade first, and honestly, I am so glad I did. This is a hill that I will die on. I know some people don't necessarily love this book. However, I loved the way it was written. I was invested in all of it. However, I love the way it was written. It does have like 4 or 5 different stories that all take place before the event of Throne of Glass. And because it's like a series of short stories, I was very invested in this story. The question becomes, should you read this first, third, or fourth? Like I said, I recommend reading it first. I did that and it helped me so much when I got to Throne of Glass because Throne of Glass references the events in Assassin's Blade frequently. I feel like I had a better understanding reading Throne of Glass because I had the background knowledge from the Assassin's Blade. And honestly, Throne of Glass is kind of a slow start to the series. It's definitely not my favorite, and I feel like a lot of people start with this aren't necessarily going to be as invested in the story. But you could read Throne of Glass first, then Crown of Midnight, and then Assassin's Blade. Or you could even read Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, Heir of Fire, and then Assassin's Blade. Honestly, as long as you read this before Queen of Shadows, then you'll be fine. Because Queen of Shadows does have information that is more impactful if you read the Assassin's Blade before it. My advice for where to read this would be, if you are someone who likes to have background knowledge, who likes to have the information given to you as you're reading, you should probably read Assassin's Blade first. If you're also someone who likes chronological order, then you should read Assassin's Blade first. Because if you read it later, it does go back in time and it will take you out of the main storyline. And honestly, I don't think I would have liked that because each book does kind of end on a cliffhanger and I would have not enjoyed going back further and having to wait to read the next one. If you are someone who likes to figure out what is happening as you're reading, I would recommend reading this third or fourth, not first. Because this is referenced so heavily throughout the entire series, especially in the first few books, you would be essentially getting like little puzzle pieces in Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight. So if you're someone who likes to take the information and try to solve the puzzle or figure out what's happening, it would probably be best to wait to read Assassin's Blade. I can't say which one would be better, third or fourth, because I didn't read it in that order. And honestly, like I said, I personally wouldn't like it because it takes me out of the storyline. But as long as you read it before Queen of Shadows, that would be my biggest recommendation. So then the story goes Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, Heir of Fire, Queen of Shadows, Empire of Storms, and then Tower of Dawn. So these two you can read separately or you can do the tandem read because the stories take place at the exact same time. I did the tandem read and honestly, it is a lot of fun. I will say that. But I kind of wish I'd read them separately for me personally. The reason being is I loved both these books. Empire of Storm is my favorite. But as I was reading, I found myself invested in both of the stories, and so I actually ended up reading more than I was supposed to. So you're supposed to read like a few chapters at a time and then switch. And I didn't really want to stop reading either one of these to switch. It was also kind of difficult for me just to keep track of the switching and where I was at, and I got off a lot. However, for a first-time read, the tandem is usually recommended, especially if you do not like Chaol. If you cannot stand him as a character, Tower of Dawn is his entire book. Tower of Dawn is Chaol's story. However, I will say that at the beginning, it's really focused on him. However, as you go through the story, there are more characters who have a larger role in the story. And honestly, this book gets a lot of hate, but I actually really enjoyed it. It's not necessarily my favorite, but it's not as bad as everyone says. It's also really fun to do the tandem read because there are some events that are referenced in both stories that are really impactful at the time of reading. Overall, I kind of think it'd probably be best for a first-time read to do the tandem and then on a reread to read separately. And then the last book is Kingdom of Ash, and honestly, you will probably cry. But that is my Throne of Glass reading order. If you have any suggestions or ideas, I would love to hear it.